Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into some deeply insightful commentary that gets to the absolute core of why Jesus performed miraculous works, specifically looking at Matthew chapter 11. But to really get this, we've got to set the scene. Just imagine this for a second. John the Baptist, the great herald of the Messiah, is languishing in a dark, miserable dungeon. He's been locked up by Herod Antipas at Machaerus. And as he sits there in that extended confinement, he is going through a profound crisis of faith. Literally, everything he thought was going to happen, well, it just isn't happening.
And out of that dark prison cell comes this incredibly haunting question. Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another? It's a moment of just raw, relatable human frailty. You can almost feel the crushing weight of unmet expectations and the genuine physical suffering he's enduring. John is looking at the reports of what Jesus is doing, and it simply doesn't match the apocalyptic blueprint he had mapped out in his head.
Now, what's really interesting here is the stark contrast. John had been out there preaching about a Messiah who would bring immediate apocalyptic judgment, right? A figure with a winnowing fork in hand, ready to burn the chaff with unquenchable fire. But the reports John is actually hearing about Jesus, they feature social meals with tax collectors, physical healings, and absolutely zero immediate political overthrow of their oppressors. It's just a massive disconnect.
Section 1. The Miraculous Answer. Proof of the Promise Plan.
So how does Jesus respond to John's crisis? I love this. He doesn't send back some complex philosophical essay or a lengthy theological defense. Instead, the text shows him sending back cold, hard empirical evidence. Let's walk through the specific catalog of miracles. The blind see, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor hear good news. The commentary makes it very clear that these aren't just random magic tricks meant to draw a big crowd. No. These are highly calculated messianic credentials. Every single one of these actions was designed to be a definitive, undeniable answer to John's agonizing question.
But you might be wondering, why these specific miracles? Because they connect directly to an ancient prophetic blueprint from Isaiah 35, which foretold exactly what the restoration would look like. Jesus is citing this to prove that he is, in fact, fulfilling the organic, unfolding promise plan of God. These miracles are the exact evidence John needs to realize that the prophecies are definitely coming true. It's just happening in a different sequence than he originally expected.
Which brings us to this absolutely crucial concept: restorative mercy. Let's unpack this for a second. The source explains that the kingdom of heaven advances first through dynamic healing and the restoration of creation, all before it culminates in final judgment. And that right there explains why the miraculous works were performed. God's redemptive architecture dictated that a fractured creation needed to experience his restoring grace before the hammer of justice fell. So Jesus? He was perfectly on schedule. After presenting all this empirical proof, Jesus sends back a message that contains this beautifully gentle pastoral exhortation. Blessed is the one who is not offended by me. He is essentially urging John, and really everyone listening to us today, to align their faith with God's unfolding timetable rather than their own preconceptions. It's an invitation to trust that the Messiah's methods of mercy are part of a divine wisdom that completely transcends our human expectations.
Section 2. A Generation of Indifference. The Danger of Presumption.
But here we run into a major complication. Despite these incredible, undeniable miracles, the general public largely rejected the message entirely. The source snaps out this impossible no-win situation using the parable of the marketplace children. Think about it. John the Baptist comes with ascetic fasting, and the public accuses him of having a demon. Then Jesus arrives partaking in social meals, and they label him a glutton and a drunkard. They refuse to mourn with John, and they refuse to dance with Jesus. They simply wouldn't conform to God's varied initiatives. But the text provides a really powerful counter to that stubborn public rejection. Wisdom is justified by her deeds. The commentary points out that the righteous results, the actual tangible fruit of both John's and Jesus' ministries, ultimately validate divine wisdom. And that's completely regardless of what fickle public opinion might dictate. The miracles stand as a testament to the truth, even when people flat out refuse to see it. And that kind of willful blindness, it leads to some severe consequences. Jesus pronounces covenantal woes upon specific cities: Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum. Why these cities in particular? Because they witnessed the vast majority of his miraculous works. They had front row seats to the restorative mercy of God, and yet they refused heart repentance. The source notes this is a form of intra-Jewish polemic, a stark, serious warning against covenantal presumption. The theological weight of those woes really comes down to this simple equation. Greater revelation equals greater responsibility. The text is issuing a stark warning here. Mere proximity to messianic miracles just isn't enough. Just being around the healing power of Jesus without actual internal repentance yields eschatological condemnation. The miracles weren't just a magic show. They demanded a real response of the heart.
Section 3, the invitation to rest, bypassing the proud.
Thankfully, the narrative does not end with judgment. The text pivots beautifully to a universal summons of sovereign grace meant specifically for the humble. To really grasp the power of this invitation, we have to understand what the first-century populace was actually laboring under. They were getting crushed by man-made, legalistic additions to the law, burdensome traditional obligations, and a total lack of compassionate assistance from the religious scribes. Honestly, they were spiritually and physically exhausted.
And it's right into this exhaustion that Jesus offers his yoke. Now, we need to strip away our modern assumptions about this word. Within its ancient Hebraic cognitive environment, a yoke wasn't just some heavy farming tool. It was a well-known metaphor representing submission to a rabbi's specific instruction, their interpretation of the Torah, and their divine wisdom.
Let's see how this builds, because it creates an incredible contrast. On one hand, you have human legalism, oppressive, burdensome, and strictly traditional. But on the other hand, you have Jesus' yoke. The original words describe it as easy, meaning well-fitted or comfortable and light. It's driven by spirit-empowered grace. Jesus wasn't offering to simply pile more rules onto their backs. He was offering a completely different, better way to carry the weight of living righteously.
Taking Jesus' well-fitted yoke leads directly to true eschatological rest for the soul. The commentary clarifies that this rest, a concept that actually echoes back to the prophet Jeremiah, isn't about the total abolition of the Torah. Rather, it's a restoration of an unmediated divine relationship based on internalized, heart-level obedience. It's resting in the grace of a Messiah who has already proved his power and mercy.
Section 4. Conclusion. The meaning of the miracles. So, to summarize our explainer today, Jesus' miracles were absolutely never random events. They were the intentional, empirical proof of his restorative mercy, specifically performed to solve a massive crisis of expectation by proving that God's plan was advancing right on schedule, which leaves us with a deeply personal question drawn from the source to ponder. Are you willing to align your faith with a kingdom of mercy, or are you still offended by a Messiah who defies your expectations? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep seeking the truth.